We're on the homeward stretch with this series of lectures, right? Well, just remember, we've covered a lot of material, but there's lots more that could be covered. So if you want to come and join us at our health retreat in Washington State, we'd be glad to have you there. We have 10 and 17-day programs. Education programs, we have 24-day treatment-only programs for people with really serious diseases or people who are not in a position really to learn and implement education.
So
and
what's the approximate cost for doing that?
The 10-day program is $2,500 per person. If people come as a married couple, then they get $1,000 off the second person. And then the 17-day program is $3,500. And that includes, and if you know anything about, that might sound like a lot, but if you know anything about other health retreat programs, you would know that that's a pretty good price. If you know anything about hotel prices, you know that that's a pretty good price. And we give you much more than a hotel. We do have, the room and board is all there included in that price. We include all the education, the basic treatments, the labs at the beginning, at the end of the program so you can see your progress, the meals and the consultations. What was that? Yes? Good food. Yes, good food. The only thing we don't include in that price is the more advanced medical treatments like hyperbaric oxygen therapy and IV nutrient therapy, which we can do during the education program. We can do some of it, not a lot, because we don't have time with all the education. In the treatment-only programs, we do a lot of that, because that's the main focus. And so those are 24-day programs, the treatment-only day programs.
Do you mind repeating that last statement, that hyperbaric is included in these 10 days?
It's not included. We can't, it's not included in the price.
Yeah.
We can do some hyperbarics. Depending on how many people we have in the program, you could probably do hyperbarics once a day. So a 10-day program, you could do about 8 treatments maybe, and a 17-day program, probably about 15 treatments, max. During the 24-day program, we do the hyperbarics twice a day, plus we do the intravenous therapies. And those of course are the most expensive programs, and the price is custom based on what we're doing with the patient.
And then you mentioned nutritional, what?
Intravenous nutrient therapies. Yeah, we're actually doing high-dose vitamin C intravenously, and B vitamins, glutathione, ozone, lots of different therapies that can be really, really powerful. But what we do there is based on individual symptoms, diagnosis, and budget. Because those treatments cost a lot more. Yeah. All right, well, we're talking about avoiding heart attacks tonight and strokes. Let's have a word of prayer before we begin. Father in heaven, we ask for your wisdom and guidance as we contemplate these things. We thank you that you have given such amazing things in your word and in the spirit prophecy that we can know how to treat ourselves and our loved ones. We ask for a special blessing of your healing hand to attend each person especially if they start a new journey toward health by making lifestyle changes as a result of this seminar. I pray that you would magnify their effects and efforts. And we pray for special wisdom tonight, and I ask that my words would be acceptable in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen. We have this incredible human pump inside our chest. It's only about the size of a man's fist, which doesn't actually seem as big as you'd think. It beats about 3 billion times in the average lifetime. And if you think about that, it's self-repairing. How would you like to have a water pump on your car that was self-repairing and could last for 80 years or 100 maybe? That'd be nice. So it's pretty amazing in comparison to human inventions. But it's heart disease that kills almost every second American, 40%. Every 24 hours, 3,000 Americans will have a heart attack. That's a lot. What are women worried about getting? Breast cancer, right? Yeah. Do you know that the women's death rate from heart disease is 8 times higher than from breast cancer? Heart disease. We usually think about heart disease with men, right? But it's a serious issue with women as well. So we're going to discover the underlying cause of heart disease tonight. And there's several things that are linking into it, so we'll talk about some of those linking things first. So we're talking about blood pressure. This is not the underlying cause yet. But for the average American population, a 3 millimeter decrease in systolic blood pressure results in 11% fewer strokes, 7% fewer coronary events, and 55% fewer deaths. And that means that if you would come to our retreat and drop your blood pressure by 30 points, which we routinely see, or more, but let's just say 30 for easy figuring, that's 10 times that drop, right? That means you would be reducing your stroke risk by 110%, your coronary event risk by 70%, and your death risk by 50%. You see how that's pretty significant? Pretty significant. So, what does it mean to have good blood pressure or bad blood pressure? Well, quotes good blood pressure or textbook normal blood pressure is 120/70, up to 120/70. Basically, lower is better as long as you're not fainting or dizzy. Your body doesn't usually allow your blood pressure to go too low. If your blood pressure is going too low, you're either dehydrated or you've got some pathology, or you're taking a drug that's forcing it too low. Otherwise, it doesn't normally go too low. If you're not sick, it's going to keep it where it needs to be in order to perfuse your body. Okay? Diabetics should be less than 130/80. It doesn't mean that it's better for them to be higher. It just means it's harder for them to be lower. So we give them a little bit of latitude, right? But we don't give them latitude in the other direction. So high blood pressure is any measurement above 140/90. So even though normal is considered 120/70, they don't really want to diagnose it until it's 140/90, except for diabetics, you see. Even though we consider their low number to be a little bit higher, that's also the cap for what's considered high blood pressure. Because you really don't want to have high blood pressure with diabetes, because diabetes means damaged blood vessels. And high blood pressure and damaged blood vessels don't go good together. Let's take a quiz. Perfect health requires?
Perfect circulation.
Oh, come on. We have to have a better response than that. Let's try the quiz again. now that it's open book. Perfect health requires?
Perfect circulation.
Okay, good. That's better. Can you have perfect circulation and be a diabetic? No. No. Being diabetic, by definition, means you don't have perfect circulation. Yeah. 1 in 3 adults in America have high blood pressure, and most don't even know they have it. 1 in 3. There might be vague symptoms like a headache or pounding sensation in chest or ears. In my 20s, my blood pressure ran 125/75. That's a little high. Probably most doctors wouldn't yet diagnose me with high blood pressure. But when I began implementing the lifestyle changes that I now teach, my blood pressure dropped to something like 90/55. So did I have high blood pressure? Sure. Well, actually, most people will drop like this if they are following the laws of health. Sometimes it takes a very long time for that to happen if they've already climbed up there to the high blood pressure mark, but I'm a little older than my 20s now. But my blood pressure is less lower than it was in my 20s. So that's pretty amazing, right? Some of the complications of high blood pressure include stroke, congestive heart failure, heart attack, atherosclerosis, aneurysm, kidney disease, retina disease, weakened memory and mental ability. You start damaging things when you have high blood pressure. An aneurysm is basically, a vessel that gets overstretched. Like a bicycle tire where you suddenly have a little balloon on one side and the thing is going like this as you ride? Yeah? That's an aneurysm in your head. If you have that bulge in a vessel, you could have an aneurysm somewhere else too, in your heart or in your descending aorta. And an aneurysm isn't automatically deadly, except if it ruptures, then it usually is, right? So they usually have to surgically repair them, and they can cause some damage just from ballooning up, especially in the brain. But you really, right, yeah, an aortic aneurysm can actually, because it bulges, it can actually hit up against the spine and start causing back problems because it's, every time the heart pumps, it slams against the spine. So, but you really don't want it to rupture. So there's a 3-week, 80% effective treatment in this particular study. There were 73 men and women with high blood pressure, averaging 150/81 at the start. Their average blood pressure at the end was 129/78. That's pretty good, right? That's lower than what you would classify as high blood pressure. It might not be quite ideal yet, but it's below the 140/80. And 80% of them were off their blood pressure medication, which was how they were measuring their effectiveness. This is going to be effective if we can get your blood pressure down and you be off your medication at the same time. That's what they said. I bet you're hoping to learn what the treatment was, right? All right, here it is. Very, very, very simple. Very simple. Not necessarily easy. Here it is. Number 1. Abstinence from alcohol, tobacco, and coffee. That's easy, right? Maybe not. That's simple, I should say. I said that backwards. It's simple, right? Maybe not easy. It might be hard to achieve that, but it's simple. Number 2, total vegetarian diet. Number 3, aerobic exercise. That is super, super simple. Maybe not easy, but super simple. Let's break that down into each one of those individual components. We'll just talk a little bit about each item there. Let's talk about caffeine. We already talked about caffeine a little bit. And by the way, I have a whole lecture on caffeine, which I usually don't let you get away without hearing that lecture. But I chose to do several other things, and I'm touching on it lightly. But one study showed that 1 cup of coffee per day may raise the diastolic and systolic blood pressure 5 to 6 points. 5 to 6 points. Now remember, a drop of 3 points reduced the stroke risk by 11%. That means that 1 cup is increasing your stroke risk by 22%. 1 cup. It also, I'm sorry?
Can we interrupt with just a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so these up and down statistics about coffee, how is it possible conscionably to find studies that show the opposite?
Well, what you want to do, one thing you want to do is at the end of the study, you want to look who sponsored the study. So if it's Starbucks, then you know it's probably advertising propaganda rather than actual scientific research.
But they're not all done, sponsored probably by...
No, sometimes it's a little harder to tell. But I filter first through inspiration. And then, secondly, then we look at the science. So the inspiration determines what shows you what's good science. Yeah. Yeah. You want to read the study, because sometimes their conclusion won't correspond with their data even. They might have data that shows one thing, and they'll say something different in the conclusion, because they know that people just read the conclusion. That's a good question, and if we have time, and I think we will, hopefully you can help me remember at the end that I want to add a slide from a different lecture into this presentation to help answer that question, okay? It also raises heart rate and blood pressure, especially if combined with exercise. So that can be actually deadly, because what it does is it might not seem like it's really that big of a deal, but all of a sudden you exercise, and that now you suddenly make your heart rate and your blood pressure soar way too high, way higher than it should be for the exercise level, and that could cause an aneurysm, stroke, or heart attack.
And they probably think they're doing counteracting.
Right, right. You would think you're doing something good. I mean, exercise is good for you, and you want to exercise, but when a few of these things, you put them together, and they can be problematic. What about smoking? One slide here on smoking. Sudden death risk for smoking is 2 to 4 times higher. That's 200 to 400% higher for smokers than non-smokers. That's just sudden death of any reason, for any reason. You just suddenly keel over. 200 to 400% higher for smokers than non-smokers. And the more cigarettes smoked, the higher the risk. And the risk decreases as soon as the habit is stopped, which is amazing. I mean, sometimes we do damage to our bodies that's permanent or long-term, and we may not be able to reverse all the damage we've done to our bodies through a bad habit. But our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made, and they start to recover as soon as you get away from the thing that's causing the problem. It starts trying to heal itself. So that's pretty exciting. How about alcohol? Alcohol and blood pressure. Look at this. Just 1 to 2 ounces per day is enough to cause significantly high blood pressure. 1 to 2 ounces. Who stops with that? Yeah, that's true. If you don't drink, then you've stopped at that for sure, and that's a good thing. But they want to tell you that alcohol, well, not alcohol, but they want to tell you that something is good for your heart. What is it? Red wine. Now think about this logically for just a second. Red wine? Why? Well, okay, it obviously isn't the alcohol that's helping your heart, because otherwise white wine would work just as good, right? It's got the alcohol in there too. So if it's some kind of phytochemical that's in the grape, why not get that phytochemical from the grape before you rot it? And then you don't have the negative effects of the alcohol, because stroke risk goes way up when you put alcohol in your body. It doesn't matter if it's red, white, or blue. Alcohol is not good for you, period. It's not good for your brain either. And so if there's any good benefits you want to try to get from the grapes, you want to get it before they're rotten. Janelle, you were going to add something.
Well, I was going to say that's how they would set up a study right there, is they would compare 1 drink with 10 drinks.
Yeah.
And say, oh, look, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Or if they would study 0 drinks with 1 drink, they would see a very significant difference.
Yeah, that's right. They often try to make the same bad habit into the control group, right?
1 or less.
Yeah.
And then
And why don't they compare it with those who eat none of that bad habit? Because it would show that it was problematic if they did that.
a very low dose.
Yeah. All right, yes.
Go back to the smoking. Does the vaping affect the same as cigarettes?
Vaping is very dangerous as well. There's other reasons, and I haven't done a deep study yet on vaping. But, I mean, some people are going to say, well, you got some benefits. I suppose you can have the theoretical benefit that you're not getting carbon monoxide because you're not burning anything with the vaping. So you don't get the carbon monoxide. But apparently there's a lot of other chemicals in the vaping that is not even in the cigarettes, which are extremely dangerous. And vaping is only a thing recently, so there's not a lot of long-term studies showing its problems. We know for sure that nicotine alone is problematic, and we know that because people have both smoked and chewed tobacco for decades, centuries almost, right? And we know that smoking causes lung cancer and chewing causes throat and mouth cancer, right? So the tobacco itself, the nicotine, the other substances that are in the tobacco are problematic, and those have been transferred into the vaping. So it wouldn't have the tar either. So that's how it's marketed, is that it doesn't have the tar and it doesn't have the carbon monoxide. But it's still not a good plan. And it could be actually in some ways a worse plan. It's hard to say now. So let's look at the idea of being on a plant-based diet and blood pressure. So remember, I'm taking that study and the simple little 3-step process for lowering the blood pressure, and we're looking at each item here. Here is blood pressure in vegetarians. Notice that the vegetarians, their blood pressure kind of tends to increase toward retirement for some reason. Maybe it's because they're trying to juggle still a job and grandkids and kids, and their life is chaotic. And then once they retire, things get better. And they end up with even lower blood pressure, apparently sometimes, than they had originally. But the meat eaters, they just keep going up and up and up and up. And the vegetarians never even enter the hypertension zone. Now, when I say vegetarian here, I'm talking about total vegetarian. Technically, a vegetarian is someone who doesn't eat animal products. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it's kind of become common to use the term vegetarian to refer to a lacto-ovo vegetarian, which is not really accurate. What people call a vegan should be called a vegetarian. And I guess you could say lacto-ovo vegetarian, but vegetarian means vegetables, right? Lacto-ovo stuff is not vegetables. Vegetable matter, I should say. We're not just talking about vegetables only, we're talking about fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. But the milk and eggs don't fall in that category. So, all right. 3 main causes for high blood pressure. Well, we looked at how to reduce it and some of the integrating factors, but we're going to talk about 3 specific reasons for the blood pressure going high. Number 1, vessel constriction, and this is very common. This is what we call atherosclerosis. And if you build up those plaques in your vessel, depending on where they are, they're going to make your blood pressure go up more or less. Sometimes if you have plaques going to the kidneys or to the brain right here, it's going to dramatically increase your pressure. And you're going to try to force that pressure down with a drug, right? Because you go to your doctor and he's going to give you a drug. But the problem is, your body knows that you have to have that pressure in order to get blood to your brain or your kidneys. That's why it has increased the pressure and ramped it up. So now you force it down with a drug, and the body says, we're not getting enough blood to the brain. We better do what? So the body starts pumping out hormones that make the blood pressure start going back up. So it looks amazing when you go to the doctor and you get that pill and you're like, wow, my numbers are good now, I'm good to go. And about 4 days to 4 weeks later, all of a sudden you're like, it's up again. Well, that's because your body knows it has to be up. You haven't dealt with the root cause, you're only trying to treat the symptom. So you go back to the doctor, right? What does he do? Does he say, well, we made a mistake, that's a bad drug? Does he say that? No. He says, well, you stay on that drug and we're going to add another one. And guess what happens? You go home and whoo, you're good to go, right? Numbers came right down just nicely. A few weeks later, you're at Costco. And you decide, hey, I'm going to check out the thing in the little chair right there, right? So you put your arm in there, and all of a sudden, whoa, I thought it was good. So you go back to the doctor again. Have you heard of one of the definitions of insanity? Keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So after you're on about 4 or 5 different blood pressure medications, you're not feeling too great. And they usually never stop them. And you still have high blood pressure. You got to get rid of the constriction. You got to get rid of the atherosclerosis before it's going to come down, and that's not going to happen overnight. Okay, the second thing here that's going to cause high blood pressure is thick and sticky blood. Quiz time. How many red blood cells in a drop of blood the size of the ball in the end of the ballpoint pen? 5 million. Okay. What happens when you get that blood thick and sticky? Because you're dehydrated? The blood cells stick together and you start clumping and it starts blocking those little capillaries, right? What's that going to do to your pressure? It's going to increase it. What do you have to do in a honey bear when you're trying to get really thick honey out of the honey bear? What are you going to do? Yeah, what else? Squeeze. What are you doing? You're increasing the pressure inside more than the pressure outside. Yeah? But it doesn't want to come out because it's thick and sticky. What if somebody puts maple syrup in that honey bear and you don't know it and you're not paying any attention? You flip it over and give it a big squeeze. What's going to happen? Big mess, right? So if you're dehydrated, your blood is thick and sticky like the honey. Of course, your body has to ramp up the pressure because it's got to maintain perfusion. So if you want to make it hard on your body, you want to stay dehydrated, and then the pressure has to go up. But what do we take oftentimes? Maybe the 3rd or 4th blood pressure medication is what? A water pill. Yeah? What is that? It's something that causes you to pee more, which is going to do what? Dehydrate you. So you just perpetuated your problem. It might theoretically help your pressure for a while because it makes less volume in the blood vessels. So that shrivels up the blood vessels and reduces the pressure. But then it makes the blood what? Thick and sticky. And so the heart says, whoa, we better do what? Start upping the pressure. So the heart starts working harder to get the pressure up. The third one, sodium sensitivity. Salt can be a major factor in high blood pressure. All right. Dehydration is linked to high blood pressure, high cholesterol, angina or chest pain, chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, high blood glucose levels. It's amazing what just getting hydrated can do. And again, I'm not talking about my water lecture right now. I have lots more of this stuff there. But they actually did a study. This was called the Adventist Health Study. They did 2 of them, Adventist Health Study 1 and Adventist Health Studies 2. And we saw from National Geographic that Adventists were famous for some of the best longevity in the world. And in this particular study, they found that drinking 5 or more glasses of water per day reduced the risk of heart disease, fatal heart disease, for men by 54% and for women by 41% compared to drinking 2 or fewer glasses. Now, what do you notice about those numbers? That's ridiculously low. 5 glasses of water is not even close to being enough. I wish they would have added in another category for those who drink 10 or more. You really should be, most people should be drinking 10 to 12 glasses of water per day, 8-ounce glasses. That's on a day when you're sitting around like this in an air-conditioned building. If you're outside sweating in 110-degree weather or putting on a roof, you could be drinking a gallon a day and still be dehydrated. But here's the most interesting fact about this study, this particular piece of data in this study. Notice what they said. A high intake of fluid other than water in comparison to a low intake of non-water fluids actually increase the risk of fatal heart disease by 247% in women and 146% in men. It's only water that counts. You can't get your hydration from something else, especially not from a caffeinated beverage. Am I right? Caffeine is a diuretic. It's going to make you dehydrated. Some people estimate that it takes up to 5 glasses per glass of coffee that you drink in order to try to get past the dehydration that the caffeine is causing. 5 glasses per glass of coffee. So you're drinking 5 glasses of coffee, that's 25 glasses of water to try to make up what's being lost from the coffee. Now, you want to remember we talked about cleaning things with water as far as health, and we talked about hydrotherapy on the outside. And so you're also cleaning the inside of your body when you drink water, right? It's like you're washing. It's important in modern society to wash hands, right? And most people know that it's important to shower, but most people don't think about washing the inside of their body. Do you wash the inside? Do you wash your hands with orange juice? What about Coca-Cola? Milk? Coffee? No, you wash your hands with water. If you want to clean your body, you wash your body inside with water. Only water counts. Yes? You had a question.
Oh, I was wondering about like decaf coffee, things like that. Are they dehydrating or damaging?
Well, it's theoretically a little bit improved because they've reduced the caffeine, but the problem is they haven't gotten rid of all the caffeine. Decaf doesn't mean that all the caffeine's gone. So there's still some in there, number one. Number two, the chemicals that they use to pull out the caffeine are not good for you either. So it'd be better to learn a different taste. There are some coffee substitutes. I know that many times coffee drinkers don't really appreciate them that well. But there's roasted cereal coffee substitutes. Some are made from roasted barley or roasted garbanzo beans or various different things like that. Roma, Postum, there's several different brands that are like that. And you're going to have to change your taste. I think it tastes kind of like coffee, but I'm not a coffee drinker. So I don't really particularly drink them anyway because I don't like hot drinks. So it's a better idea to change your tastes rather than trying to go with the decaf. All right, back to blood pressure. Where water goes, salt will follow. So besides water helping your blood flow smoothly through the veins, water also rinses out salt. Doesn't mean you can just eat all the salt you want, but it does mean that some of the salt that you're eating, if you're staying properly hydrated, is just going to be rinsed out and not really factor as much in high blood pressure. So that brings us to salt with respect to high blood pressure. Salt is sodium chloride, and there's the sodium molecule and there's the chloride molecule. And when we're measuring sodium intake, we're talking just about the sodium part, okay? So each of them have weight. Your body needs about 250 milligrams of sodium a day. You actually need some sodium. The problem is that the average American gets 4,000 milligrams per day. It's interesting that even though you only need about 250, you can actually eat about 2,400 to 2,500 milligrams a day and not have it impact the blood pressure significantly. So you're really only trying to cut it about in half or a little bit less than half. Maybe 2,000 milligrams a day. That's about a teaspoon, or a little bit less than a teaspoon. The problem is most people get the salt from all kinds of different places than the salt shaker. If you come to our retreat, you'll notice that we have a salt shaker on the table. And some people are like horrified by that. They're, what? My doctor said no salt diet. No, if your doctor says a no salt diet, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's just ridiculous. That's not rational. It's not physiologically based. It's not valid. You may want to reduce your salt significantly. So if he says no salt, that means reduce your salt, all right? So there is some sense in a moderation of that principle. Salt is partly going to give you high blood pressure because it's a solute. If you put a bunch of solute in your blood, that draws other fluid into the blood vessels because the fluid wants to dilute the salt, because the solute, whatever the solute is. And so it pulls more fluid into the blood vessels. That fills up the blood vessels more, which is what can contribute to the high blood pressure. All right, so we talked about high blood pressure. It is a major risk factor for heart disease, but it's not the root cause. Let's see if we can find the root cause now. Notice this from the China study. American men die from heart disease at a rate almost 17 times higher than their Chinese counterparts. 17 times, that's 1,700%. Is there something wrong with American men? Is this a genetic thing? You see, people think that genetics are like their sentence in stone, right? Oh, my father had high blood pressure, my mother had high blood pressure, my grandfather had high blood pressure. I am doomed, right? Well, that's not actually true, and we're going to see this in a moment. You see, there's such a thing, is it your genes or is it your genes? Do you see what I mean by that? Is it your genetic material that you inherited from your parents, or is it your lifestyle? How you eat, how you dress, how you exercise or don't exercise? Actually, scientists say that less than 5% of disease is caused by genetic inheritance. Less than 5% of disease is caused by genetic inheritance. You see, the problem is you inherit other things from your parents besides your genetics. You inherit what? Your tendencies, your habits, your ways of eating or not eating, your ways of exercising or not exercising, right? And so likely you're going to have similar effects as them if you keep the same lifestyle as they had. They did a study with Chinese twins, and they tried to find as many twins as they could find, where one of the twins had remained in China and the other twin had immigrated to the United States. And the study was looking at those ones who had come to Hawaii. I guess that was for convenience. But Hawaii actually has worse heart attack issues than mainland US. So what do you think they found? They studied them for a long time to see their rates of heart disease risk. What do you think they found? They found the ones that came to Hawaii took on the heart attack risk of Americans, or worse. And the twin that stayed in China had the heart attack rates of the Chinese. So now is that genes, genetics, or is that lifestyle? That's lifestyle. They took on the American lifestyle, so they took on the American diseases. Now I want you to understand that not all calories are created equal. We'll redress this point again when we talk about weight loss. I think that's tomorrow night. In the China study, they discovered that the least active Chinese, equivalent to office workers, so these people are not getting exercise, ate 30% more calories and had 20% less body weight than average Americans. Can you imagine that? They ate 30% more calories and had 20% less body weight than average Americans. And that's because they're eating things that are actually food. In America, we're eating all these chemicalized 10,000 different ingredients that are causing us to be addicted. I forgot to tell you on the night we talked about excitotoxins that those excitotoxins, not only are they addictive, but they are an appetite stimulant. They specifically make you hungry. So when you go to the Chinese restaurant, you get that Chinese restaurant syndrome, right? And you eat this huge plate of the most gorgeously steamed vegetables you've ever seen, right? It's so big, you just go out of there so stuffed, and 30 minutes later you're hungry. Have you ever seen that? Did you know that's not physiologically possible? You can't have used up and be really hungry in 30 minutes after eating all that food. What's happened? You ate all those excitotoxins, which was an appetite stimulant. Not only were you addicted to it, but it actually caused you to feel hungry in 30 minutes after eating. So the Chinese aren't eating all that stuff. Here's an interesting study where they said, our data strongly suggests that the frequent consumption of nuts may protect against the risk of coronary heart disease events. The favorable fatty acid profile of many nuts is one possible explanation for such effect. Now we're talking about nuts here that are not covered with MSG, right? So that brings us to the idea, if not all calories are created equal, let's have a look and see if we can understand what is the problem here in America and see if we can get to the underlying problem of heart disease. This slide tells you an awful lot. And this was done in 1996, by the way, and it hasn't gotten any better. So this is, what, almost 30 years ago? 30 years ago. The U.S. food consumption, 51% refined and processed foods, 42% dairy and animal foods, and 7% fruits and vegetables. Do you see what the problem is? Let's dig a little bit deeper. We'll get some lessons here from the Framingham Heart Study. This is one of the most famous heart studies because this was a landmark study. Now, they knew this kind of before this, but it was a landmark study that helped to confirm what was the underlying cause of heart disease. So after 6 years, in 1961, the researchers published the results in the Annals of Internal Medicine, and they concluded that men with cholesterol levels over 244 had 3 times, that's 300%, the incidence of coronary heart disease than those with cholesterols less than 210. And by the way, 210 is way too high. So it'd be interesting if they compared it with those less than 180. Because it probably would have been 6 times or something like that. Well, before Framingham, there were people getting kind of honing in on this. In 1946, Dr. Lester Morrison started an experiment. He took 100 heart attack survivors. 50 of them, he had them continue their usual diet. Just eat whatever you want, just like you've always eaten. That was his control group. Excuse me. 50 of them, he had them eat a diet low in fat and cholesterol. So he obviously had some suspicions, right? They were only allowed to eat 2 ounces of lean meat twice a day. That's all. That's not very much. That's a little bit like this. And no butter, no whole eggs, no cream soups. Notice he cut out the eggs even before he cut out the meat. After 8 years, only 12, which is 24% of the control group, were left alive. But 28 or 56% of the diet group were still alive. And after 12 years, everyone in the control group was dead. But in the diet group, 19 people, 38%, were still alive. Do you think that made a significant difference? And it wasn't a very extreme diet, was it? No. So if cholesterol might be implicated in developing heart disease, let's ask what it is, what we do with it, and where it comes from, right? So what is cholesterol? Well, cholesterol is actually something that your body needs, believe it or not. It actually forms part of your cell walls and your nerve sheaths. It's a precursor to your adrenal and steroid hormones, such as hydrocortisone, aldosterone, testosterone, estradiol, progesterone, and cortisol. It's part of all those hormones. 80% of the cholesterol is used in bile from the liver to break down the fat we eat. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's also used in making vitamin D. It helps transport fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K. ADEK, you can remember that. A, D, and E, and K. Those are the fat-soluble vitamins. All the other vitamins are water-soluble. Okay? That's why vitamin D is an oil. Vitamin E, you've heard of vitamin E oil? Yeah, it's an oil. But vitamin C is not an oil, right? So it forms a very important function in our body. The problem is too much cholesterol is deadly, and this is the problem for Americans. Just like too much salt. It's not that you have to have a no-salt diet, right? It's that you want a low-salt diet. With the cholesterol, you don't actually need to get any cholesterol in your diet at all because your body makes it. So in the presence of damaged vessels from stress or inflammation, excess cholesterol in the bloodstream will lay down these fatty plaques. There's two types of plaques. There's a hard plaque that clogs the system to death slowly. This is the kind that gives people the chest pain where they say they feel like an elephant is sitting on their chest. That's a slow plaque. Because if they're starting to have chest pain from their clogged artery, that artery is more than 90% closed. You don't have any symptoms if it's only 50% closed. No symptoms at all. 90% closed. It's more than 90% closed if they start having chest pain. Those hard plaques don't often kill you, though. They give you the chest pain, but they're not the most dangerous ones. The most dangerous ones are actually the soft plaques, which are only about 50% closed. And when that soft plaque inside, it's not hard, it's unstable, you suddenly exercise and have a coffee at the same time, maybe? Or not at the same time. I mean, you're not drinking the coffee while you're running, but you know what I mean. Close together. You exercise right after having the coffee. And suddenly your blood pressure spikes, and it causes that plaque to rupture. And when that soft plaque ruptures, whoosh, this fatty core inside that plaque spills out in the bloodstream. And when the blood comes in contact with that soft fat, it doesn't like it, and it goes, it clots. And you know what the symptom is? First symptom, sudden death. That's why people keel over with a heart attack. It's because a soft plaque ruptured. And you never know when that's going to happen. You don't have any symptoms. And it just happens suddenly because you have a standard American diet. Yes?
So, like, I have a friend whose husband ran every day.
Mm-hmm.
And he just keeled over while he was running.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was something like that.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yep.
Even though he ran every day, he could still have the soft plaque.
That's right, and we're going to actually address that in a minute. You could have a soft plaque. You probably most certainly do have a soft plaque if you're on a standard American diet.
So why do women don't have the same symptoms
They do generally have the same symptoms as men. They don't have quite the same rate as men because estrogen seems to have some protective effects on the heart. But, and that was kind of the theory behind estrogen replacement therapy. But the problem is they found out that they were going to keep the women from getting heart attacks by giving them estrogen. And they ended up giving them cancer, breast cancer, and pulmonary embolisms. So even though they were, and by the way, they didn't actually have less heart attacks. So it's more than just the estrogen, but
I think she was also asking why do women have atypical symptoms? Yeah. Yeah, like they don't have your, I think it's just because women tolerate pain, but honestly, I don't know.
well,
They had babies. They're like, what's that?
yeah,
Just a little play.
yeah.
But I do think they do probably have.
They will still have,
Sometimes back pain.
they still will have a lot of times the pain in the jaw if they're looking for it, to the left side or the scapula. 1 out of 3 people who have a heart attack will die from that heart attack. 1 out of 3 people who have a heart attack will die from that heart attack. How do arteries clog? Here is a normal artery on the top. It looks clean as a whistle. It's actually a cutaway, so we can see inside. This would be like cutting away and looking at the inside of your kitchen drain, right? You put a brand new kitchen drain in, it's nice and clean, right? But after cooking and rinsing down the meat drippings for quite a while, pretty soon, what's the inside of that drain look like? It looks just like the inside of your blood vessel. Ooh. Anybody cleaned out one of those drains? That should be a lesson to what you don't want your blood vessels to look like, right? So they find that the buildup in there is from fats, mainly cholesterol and triglycerides. That's what that clogged artery is made of. And there's calcium in there too, which starts to calcify the fats, as we talked about earlier, and turn into actually calcium deposits that are hard like rock, like glass. So what is good range for lipids? The lipids are the fats or the cholesterol in your bloodstream. Well, they used to say, and maybe this is okay, 100 plus your age. Because if you're 99, I guess we don't care too much if your cholesterol is 199. Okay? But essentially, that implies that you have to always be going up, and that's not true. That's not true. You can stay at the same healthy level all your entire life. So you'll see a more specific number in a little bit. But essentially, we want our HDL cholesterols. That stands for high-density lipoproteins, or you can use the acronym helpful cholesterol, the H for helpful, because the high-density ones actually help to get the plaques reduced and carry the plaques out and get rid of them in the liver. So they're actually helping to reduce cholesterol, whereas the low-density ones, or the lousy ones, those are building up the plaques in the vessels. And so usually we want to see the HDLs below 35, above 35, excuse me, and the LDLs below 100. The VLDLs, you never want them. They're very lousy. We'd like to see a ratio, which is the total cholesterol divided by the HDLs, to be less than 4. Some of these numbers lose their significance a little bit as you get the cholesterol way down. So you don't have to worry so much about getting your HDLs high enough if your total cholesterol is low enough. Your triglycerides, we'd like to see them below 150. Now, the bad thing is that the drug industry has actually pushed now for lower and lower and lower and lower numbers, because they want to, what that does is it adds more and more people into the pool of people that they can prescribe the drug for. And so if they can force the thing down with the drug, then they can say that's helpful. Interestingly enough, studies show that forcing it down with the drug does not reduce your heart attack and stroke risk. Just because you have a better number doesn't mean you have a better outcome. So you do want to have a lower cholesterol, but you want to lower it in the right way. And you don't want to just be trying to force it down artificially. We already talked about a couple natural ways to pills to take to reduce cholesterol rather than a statin. Let's look at this slide because it tells us something interesting. You see heart disease death rates for men aged 55 to 59 across 20 countries around 1955. Notice that the countries that are most known for their meat production are the ones that are highest up there. You see that? United States, Finland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Those are the cows, the sheep. You know, in New Zealand is the sheep, right? And big cattle farming in Canada, US, Finland. Dairy in Finland. And then you see the ones kind of in the middle that aren't quite so famous for their animal production, but still eat a fair amount of it. These are like the Western European countries and Northern Europe. And then you get down to some of the other countries which have a very unique diet in comparison to the other countries, like Japan, France, Portugal, Ceylon, and Yugoslavia, and they have way lower heart disease death rates. So much lower that it's almost like 7 times less heart disease from the lowest countries to the highest countries. Yes. So let's ask ourselves the question, what about cholesterol? Where is it found? Where are we going to get it? How do we avoid it? Think of the fattiest plant food that you can think of. There's no subliminal things here, right? Avocado is pretty fatty, but a coconut is probably the fattiest one, right? A coconut. How much cholesterol in a coconut? Are you serious? None? She says none. She says none. Anybody else want to vote? There is no cholesterol in coconut. They're right. There's some saturated fat, but there's no cholesterol in there. Did you know? Oh, how much cholesterol in macadamia nuts? None. There is no cholesterol in any plant product. None. Zero, zippo. Your cholesterol is only in animal products. Okay? And let me show you this, because notice what is on the very top in cholesterol. Eggs. Now, in the medical industry, they want to tell you that if you have high cholesterol, you should only eat about 5 eggs a week or something like that, right? But one egg has 274 milligrams of cholesterol. That's enough. Well, actually, I said that wrong. They don't tell you to eat 5 eggs a week. They tell you to eat no more than 50 milligrams of cholesterol a day. That's what it was. 50 milligrams of cholesterol a day. So one egg is enough cholesterol in that scenario for a whole week. Is that right? Who eats only one egg a week? Who eats only one egg a week? Or less. That's not usual, right? Not usual. All right. Well, let's look at it this way. Let's try to think about your house being on fire. Let's say your house is on fire. Let's say in your house you have lots of valuable paintings. So you call the fire department, you say, please come and save my house. I have lots of valuable paintings. And so the fire departments are really switched on in your town. They get there really fast. They start spraying water on the front of the house. And you're looking at that and you're like, you run around the back and you grab a can of gasoline and you start sloshing gasoline on the back of the house. Does this make any sense? If you want them to stop the fire, you would want to not keep adding fuel to the fire. Is that right? Now think about all the people in America who are on cholesterol medications. They're trying to put out a fire of too much cholesterol in their body by taking a drug, but they're still pouring fuel on the fire, right? They're still eating cholesterol. Does that make any sense? If you have high cholesterol, why not stop eating cholesterol? That would be a revolutionary idea. Do you think that would be pretty simple for a doctor to tell you? It should be. Do you think he would be able to make that make sense to almost any patient? Of course. But your average American doesn't even know that cholesterol is only in animal products. All right, it's not quite as simple as that. That is one aspect. But there's 3 main things that elevate cholesterol. Let's talk about them now. 3 main things. One is dietary cholesterol. Duh, we just figured that one out, and that one should be self-evident. But here's something else that's very interesting. The second one is dietary fat. Dietary fat. So what does that mean? That means it could be that you're getting your dietary fat from a plant source, and you could still drive your cholesterol up. How does that work? We'll talk about that in a second. The other thing, the third thing, is animal protein. Now, people have said, oh, well, if you want to eat eggs, eat just the white of the egg. Have you heard this? Because most of the cholesterol is in the yolk. That's true. So if you are eating only the white, you would be having less dietary cholesterol. Is that right? Yes. The problem is, what is the white? Animal protein. So the animal protein is now going to stimulate your body to make more of its own cholesterol. So even though you got rid of the yolk, you're still making your body make cholesterol. Is that clear? Why does dietary fat, including plant fat, why could that make your cholesterol go up? Well, how many of you have ever made soap? Anybody here? Made soap? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Half a dozen of you. Okay. Let me ask you another question. When you wash your dishes and they're greasy, you only use water, right? Huh? Why do you use soap? Yes. See, oil does not dissolve in water. But soap makes it so that the oil can dissolve in water. Is that right? And so suddenly the soap dissolves that oil and it just dissolves into the water. You no longer see the oil floating on the surface after you add the soap. Now, for those of you who have made soap, question. What is one main ingredient of all soap-making processes? A fat. A fat. So now, did you ever wonder about the fact that when you eat fat, that fat has to get into your bloodstream, which is mostly water? How do you get oil to pump around in your blood vessels with water? What do you need? Soap. You need soap. That's exactly right. You know God made us with our own soap factory in our body? Mm-hmm. You see, our body makes bile. Our body makes bile, and bile is made almost completely of cholesterol, which is a fat. You need a fat to make a soap. Bile is the soap that is needed to emulsify the fat so that it can dissolve in the water of your blood. Is that amazing? So when you eat a whole pile of fat, doesn't matter where it comes from, even if it's plant fat, what does your body have to do? It has to pump out a lot of bile to dissolve all that fat. Well, if it pumps out a whole pile of bile, now what does it need to do? It needs to make more bile. Right? And in order to make more bile, it needs the raw constituents to make that bile. And what is one of the raw constituents to make that bile? Cholesterol. So now your body has to manufacture cholesterol to make more soap. Is that clear? So we had a patient who came through our program, a couple. They did fantastic. They lost weight. Their cholesterols came dropping down like a stone. They were so excited. They went home and they were excited about the food. They were going to change their lifestyle and their diets. They went home. A few months later, they called me up. They said, "We just went to the doctor and got our cholesterols measured again. And it's almost back up to what it was before." And I said, "Wow. Are you eating any animal products?" No, we're doing everything that you told you. I went through the list. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing this? No, we're doing everything. Are you staying away from cytotoxins? Yes. Pretty soon I was like, well, I don't know. After a little pause, they said, "Do you think that coconut milk could make your cholesterol go up?" I said, "Yeah, if you eat a lot of it, I'm sure it could, because it contains a lot of fat. Your body has to make more cholesterol in order to make the soap to deal with the fat, right?" And they said, "Well, we really liked that one smoothie that we made at the retreat, and we put coconut milk in there. So we've been making that every day, and we've been drinking a can of coconut milk each per day." I was like, yeah, that could definitely make your cholesterol go up. This is why we talk about temperance, right? Temperance is, what's the definition of temperance? avoiding that which is harmful, but also using that which is good in moderation. Just because something might be good for you doesn't mean you can just go hog wild on it.
But you just said though that coconut does not contain cholesterol.
It doesn't. But what does it contain? Fat. That fat is now making your body need to make more cholesterol in order to make soap in order to deal with the fat in the bloodstream. Yeah. So remember, it's not just dietary cholesterol that can make your cholesterol go up, but it's also fat. So it's good to get away from the things that have cholesterol. That makes perfect sense. If you have high cholesterol, rather than going on a drug to bring it down, just stop eating cholesterol. That would make perfect sense. But don't just replace that with a whole bunch of high-fat other things, right? This is not just about eating a plant-based diet or a vegan diet, right? Poppin' potato chips would be a vegan diet, is that right? Is that a healthy diet? No. No, that's not a healthy diet.
Avocados fit into it.
Avocados, sure, you want to eat some avocado. Let me give you a hint here. This is extra credit. Let me give you a hint. God has shown us in the packaging of the plant how much it would be, how much you should overeat on it, or how much you should consume of it, right? So, is an avocado easy to get to? Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, you just cut it with a knife, right? You open it up. I mean, yeah, you have to you were thinking of picking it off the tree, right? No. I'm talking about, you get to the food part, right? You just cut it open. Simple. So you would think about eating more avocados than you would coconuts. Is that right? Is a coconut harder to get to than an avocado? Yeah. Not only is it harder to get to it in the tree, but then you got to take off this giant husk. And once you get that off, you still got to crack the nut inside, right? So God showed us with that packaging that it's not the best thing to overeat on coconut. Think about a macadamia nut, the richest nut that there is. Has anybody ever tried to crack a macadamia nut? I can tell you what, you can't do it at home. You need some special equipment. You're going to hurt yourself if you start trying to whack that thing with a hammer or something like that. It is one hard nut to crack. What is God telling us? Don't eat as much. Is an almond easier to get to than the macadamia? Yes. That's why God intended for us to eat more almonds than macadamias. So we can take a clue from God's natural packaging. Yes?
So I read that avocados actually can help lower your cholesterol. Is that
Yes, there are substances in the plants that also do that, but oftentimes what is happening is if you're adding avocados into your diet and you never used to eat avocados, you're replacing something else. And so a lot of times you're replacing something that's a worse fat. So, but you could probably overdo an avocado as well, because it is a high-fat plant food. All right, we saw this slide the other night. Here's the heart disease death rates for men in comparison to animal protein consumption. Notice it's a very linear relationship, and as animal protein consumption goes to 0, heart disease death rate goes to 0. That's because why? Now you know why. The underlying cause of heart disease is what? Too much cholesterol. Too much cholesterol. And where is most of the cholesterol found? In the animal products. That's why that's a direct linear relationship. Not only that, but in general, your animal products have way higher fat than your plant products. So not only do they have cholesterol in them, but they have a whole lot more fat. There's only a few plant products that have high fat. Nuts, avocados, olives, and coconuts. That's about all there is, right? All your other plant foods are pretty low fat in comparison to animal foods. But all your animal foods are high fat. You can see kind of the transition there. Your animal fats are way up at the top. There's a little bit of a crossover in the middle, and your plant products are down at the bottom.
that whole baked potato is that without?
Yeah, that's only the potato. Yeah, that's the problem, right? As Dr. Hans Steele used to say, people, the problem is not the potato. Nowadays it's popular to say stay away from carbs. So a potato would be a carb, right? The potato is not the problem. He says people practice surgery without a license, right? And then they make it a graveyard for all kinds of fat. Butter, sour cream, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's the problem. Use some salsa or use some chili, homemade chili. That's good inside of a potato and you don't have all the fat.
Are you talking about cow butter?
Yes, well, we're also talking about margarine because margarine is a hydrolyzed vegetable protein. And that's very damaging. Vegetable fat, excuse me. Hydrolyzed vegetable fat. Hydrogenated. We'll get it here. Thanks for your help. Yeah. When you hydrogenate something, you're basically taking a plant fat and you're breaking some of the double bonds and making it into a saturated fat. So your saturated fats generally have a tendency to cause a lot more heart disease. Your unsaturated fats tend to cause, or your hydrogenated fats tend to cause cancer. So my wife came from a family of dietitians. And there was a number of dietitians in the family, or at least a couple. And they had this kind of morbid joke at the table. And it's kind of a sad joke, really. Because they would say when it's time to lunch and everybody's sitting down, they would say, pass the heart attack or pass the cancer. And what they meant was the butter, that's the heart attack, or the margarine, that's the cancer. Right? And it's kind of a funny joke because they're both bad for you, but actually it's kind of a sad joke too, right? Because they were both still on the table. Yeah?
What about like tahini?
Good stuff.
Well, I've been putting it on a baked potato.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I mean,
Never thought of that.
What she said, we didn't hear it.
She's saying, what about tahini? And I'm saying it's good stuff. And she says she put it on a baked potato. Yeah, it's got fat in it. The main thing with vegetable fats, and this is all in my cancer lecture, which we're not going to have time to in this series, but the main thing with vegetable fats is that they tend to be very easily oxidized, and oxidized fats are very dangerous. And so your tahini comes from sesame seeds, and sesame seeds very easily oxidize. So as God made them, it's a good fat, but once you open up those seeds, you have to be very careful that it doesn't go rancid. Rancidity is oxidized fats. So something like sesame seeds or anything made from sesame seeds, sesame oil, you'd want to keep it in the fridge or freezer to keep it from going rancid, because the lower the temperature, the slower the reaction of oxidation. Oxidation is like a fire. When a fire burns, does it burn a lot worse when it's cold or hot? Hot. The hotter the temperature is, the worse the fires are. That's because fire is an oxidation reaction, and the oxidation reaction doubles. The rate of oxidation doubles for every 10 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. That's about 20-something degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperature, which means that the rate of oxidation at 400 degrees, which is a cooking temperature, is 1 million times higher than the rate of oxidation at refrigeration temperature, 40 degrees. 1 million times faster. That's why heated fats are bad for you. Okay? Heated fats. That's why olive oil is the best fat you can eat. Because you buy it, that is if you buy the first cold press extra virgin olive oil, because it hasn't been heated already in order to extract it. Your other fats, plant fats that are being extracted with heat, are already damaged to the point of being carcinogens by the time they get on the shelf. And then you come and pour them in a pan and heat them again, right? But that's for a different lecture. We got to wrap this up here. You might be thinking, well, I don't have heart disease. Well, how do you know that? If you don't have any symptoms until you get about 90% closed, you don't know that unless you went and got an angiogram. But an angiogram is fatal for about 1 in every 1,000 patients, or maybe 5,000 patients. So that's low mortality, but you don't want to be that one, right? And so it's not really a screening tool. And so if you're eating a standard American diet, you probably do have heart disease. They did a landmark scientific study at the time of the Korean War. This was published in the American Journal of Medical Association. And the military investigators examined the hearts of 300 male soldiers killed in the Korean War. The soldiers' average age was 22 years old. None had ever been diagnosed with heart disease. Fully 77.3% of the hearts examined showed gross evidence of heart disease. The researchers actually thought that they were going to figure out when heart disease started, but they realized these guys are 22 years old and they already have heart disease. Now they know that they can start seeing the formation of those plaques in the arteries in babies age 2. Yeah. Parents are starting to slowly choke their children to death by the food that they're feeding them. Those vessels are just starting to close off, beginning at age 2, beginning basically about when they get weaned. And if they're on formula, it's probably starting before that.
Also, maybe the mother eats.
Yeah, that's true too, yes. Does anybody remember Sergei Grinkov and his skating partner Ekaterina Gordieva? They were famous Olympic ice skating champions, doubles. One day they were out on the ice practicing their routine, and Sergei went to lift Ekaterina, and he suddenly went limp and dropped her, continued skating, slammed into the wall, fell over dead with a massive heart attack. 28 years old, 2 times Olympic champion, 4 times world champion. In the 31 competitions they completed in the senior and professional levels, they finished first 24 times. World-class athlete, dead with a heart attack at 28 years of age. You see, heart disease starts when you're little, when you're a baby. It doesn't start when you're old. It just slowly starts choking off the blood flow to all your body. And those plaques build up not just in the heart, they build up in the vessels all throughout the body and start choking the life from all your tissues. Remember, perfect health requires perfect circulation. We saw the other night that you could actually reverse those plaques in a few years. Here's 60 months on a plant-based diet. We called this the other night a Daniel diet or an Exodus health program diet, but by now you know that means it's a plant-based diet, right? Here is 2.5 years on a plant-based diet. Look at those severe blockages right there, and look how wide open they are over here. 2.5 years. Those will start opening up immediately as soon as you start getting the junk out of your diet. You can literally cancel your scheduled bypass surgery, change your diet, and in 2 weeks be free of the chest pain if you're like 90% closed. That doesn't mean you are now wide open in 2 weeks. It just means you've opened it just enough and you've increased decreased the viscosity of the blood just enough so that that heart doesn't have to hurt for lack of oxygen. They did one study where they put up the patients in a fancy hotel, and they fed them a very nice diet, a good healthy diet, low cholesterol, low fat, all that. And they were monitoring them with heart leads and all this. And they told them, don't exert yourself, just relax, just take it easy and have a nice time. And they were bringing the food, okay? And in 2 weeks, they didn't have any registered events of chest pain. Not either by the patient's verbal decree or by the evidence of the heart monitors. And after 2 weeks, they did one thing different. They didn't tell the patients anything. They just sent them a high-fat diet, pizza. In 30 minutes after eating the pizza, they all registered with chest pain. chest pain. That fat just clogged up that blood, slowed down the blood flow, so now they all would have had, if they were having issues with chest pain before, they all would have had closed arteries, right? 90% closed, or more, because that's when you start getting the chest pain. And just that one meal of that extra fat thickened up the blood enough so it couldn't get through there, and the heart muscle was starving for oxygen and started to have pain. Here is 1 year on a plant-based diet. Notice how that vessel is bad news to begin with, but it's opening right up in 1 year. Here is the exact opposite on an Atkins diet. That guy's in trouble, but he goes on an Atkins diet, and guess what? He's in desperate trouble. He's headed for a heart attack. It just works. This is a law of health. And we just discovered where the cholesterol comes from. The cholesterol comes only from animal products. There is no cholesterol in any plant product. Yes?
I saw a thing on John Carter on television on 3ABN, and they had a 13-year-old child that his veins were completely plugged up.
Yep.
13 years old.
My uncle is a nurse and worked in a cath lab, a cardiac cath lab, and he worked there for about 2 decades. And he said the first decade that he worked there, he said the people who came in for their angiograms and angioplasties and things like that were 60s, 70s, that kind of age. And he said very suddenly, all of a sudden, the next 10 years, he said he saw something he's never seen before. Suddenly, the majority of their patients were coming in their 40s and 50s. The American diet is getting worse and worse and worse, and so these people are coming in. We have actually treated a patient at our retreat who came there at age 40, and he had already had a stent placed 3 years earlier. Yeah. That, in my opinion, is malpractice. Because it's scientifically, there is scientific knowledge to know how to reverse that plaque. You don't have to put the stent in. But it's much more lucrative to put a stent in than to tell the patient how to reverse it by diet, yes.
We work for a lot of different doctors, and I asked them some things. And they said if you have bypass surgery and you don't do a radical change in your diet, at the most you bought about 4 years.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's right. That's right. You don't get another 50 years or 60, 70 years. You get about 4 because it'll clog up there first. We treated a patient at our retreat that a doctor placed 31 stents in their body. 31 stents. That should be malpractice as well. That made that patient, on the average cost of about $35,000 per stent placement, which is a 45-minute office procedure. You don't even go under general anesthesia. That made that patient a $1 million patient. Dr. Campbell says in the China study, there is a mountain of scientific evidence to show that the healthiest diet you can possibly consume is a high carbohydrate diet. High carbohydrate diet. That's the opposite of what they're telling you today. Everybody says low carb, carbs are bad for you. Now, I'm not talking about eating a bunch of sugar, simple sugars, okay? That's not going to be good for you. I'm talking about the complex carbohydrates that God made for us to eat. Things like brown rice, potatoes, beans, fruit, grains. If you look at every traditional culture around the world, every single traditional culture around the world bases their whole culinary tradition around a starch, around a carbohydrate. Is that right? And we're talking about the countries that have 0 chronic disease rates. These are the countries that the people are dying from infectious diseases, yes, but they're not dying from heart disease and diabetes. 0. And they all base their culinary tradition around a starch. You know, rice for Japan and China, right? Corn for South America. Potatoes for America. You just go down the line. The Southeast Islands, sweet potatoes, right? You just go down the line. Every single one of them is based, the foundation of their culinary regime is based on a carbohydrate. Like we saw last night, not last night, but yesterday afternoon, it's easy to get the protein that you need from plant foods. People are all worried about protein, right? And you can see here there's piles of protein in plant foods. You have broccoli, kale, and spinach. They're all over 40% protein. 40% protein. We usually think of beans as being high protein, but here you have your green leafies more than double the amount of protein as the beans. Now it's quiz time. When are the protein needs the greatest? When in the lifespan? Infancy, right? And when you're an infant, how much protein did God put in mother's milk? Can anybody tell me? That's close. I heard one back there. 5.8, yes. 5.8. 5.8% is what God put in the mother's milk at the time when the protein needs are the greatest. Do you think you're going to get protein deficient on a plant-based diet? No, impossible. It's never happened, as long as you have enough calories and enough variety. People only get protein deficient if they're starving. Here is, let's go back to cholesterol levels. Notice we were talking about cholesterol as the root cause of heart disease. The average cholesterol in the various different diets. Here's an omnivore who eats anything. Their average cholesterol is 193. The lacto-ovo-vegetarian has an average cholesterol of 181. And the vegan has the average cholesterol of 158. This is published in the British Medical Journal. Notice what Dr. William Castelli, who is the director of the famous Framingham Heart Study that we just talked about, notice what he says. He says, turning the patient's course of coronary heart disease around, is that possible? Yes, you just saw the angiographic proof, right? Turning the patient's course of coronary heart disease around begins to happen only when you get the serum cholesterols down into the 170, 160, 150 areas. This only occurs when the diet goes to the vegetarian type of diet. What kind of vegetarian type of diet is he talking about? Vegan diet, right? Because look at these numbers. Who's in the 170, 160, 150 areas? Only the vegans. The lacto-ovo-vegetarians are a little bit lower than the omnivores, but they're not in the range where you can start melting those plaques away. 150 years ago, a 19th century health reformer named Ellen White said the following: by departing from the plan divinely appointed for their diet, the Israelites suffered great loss. They desired a flesh diet and they reaped its results. They did not reach God's ideal of character or fulfill his purpose. The Lord gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul. They valued the earthly above the spiritual, and the sacred preeminence which was his purpose for them, they did not attain. We read that yesterday, and those of you who are here committed to trying to attain that sacred preeminence that God has for us. Here's additional study. So now you know the root cause of heart disease and how to reverse it. Let's have a few moments for questions. And then we're going to have some food downstairs again, and also we're going to have our books out. I was going to try to have the books out last night, but with all the stuff with the demonstrations, we didn't really have time to do that. So we'll have the books out tonight. If any of you still want some of our books, I know that there was a couple of you who was going to bring more money, or some of you didn't get a chance to see them. So we're going to get that ready. But let's take a couple minutes for questions. Yes?
There were 4 fruits or vegetables that were high fat. There was
Coconut, avocado, olives, and nuts. Nuts is more of a category than a single food, but yes.
Honey, what do you think about honey?
So honey is sugar.
Yes.
The Bible says it's not good to eat much honey. Notice the Bible didn't say it's not good to eat any honey. So what's the important thing here? Temperance, yes. So honey is sugar. We use some sugar at the retreat. We use some honey. We use some maple syrup. You don't want to use it overboard. Any of those. People say, I'm going to eat honey, and they think it's not sugar. Well, honey is sugar. It's still sugar. Maybe it has some additional minerals and enzymes and stuff that the bees put in there besides the table sugar that's, can have some benefits, but it's still primarily sugar. The other thing is, you've got to be careful about honey even today, because like most animal products today, well, actually I don't really call it an animal product. A lot of times the people who are vegan who come at it from more of a new age perspective, they consider honey to be an animal product, but I consider it to be a plant product, because honey is really the nectar from the flower, right? And so I do not consider eating honey to be outside of a vegan diet, which is one reason why I would probably prefer to call it a plant-based diet instead of using the term vegan. Lots of people know what vegan means, but plant-based is probably the better term. But honey is being factory farmed, just like other products. And in some cases, they actually farm the bees in giant warehouses where they keep the lights on all 24 hours a day so the bees never rest. So they're just making honey all the time. And of course, there's no flowers for them to make honey in a warehouse. So they feed them trays of high fructose corn syrup in order for them to make the honey. And there's still traces of high fructose corn syrup in their honey. It's not fully digested.
So you need to get your
And-
honey from the beekeeper that you know.
It's a good idea to know their practices, their process, or where it comes from. And you also, one thing you didn't bargain for, oh, by the way, even the ones that aren't in the warehouses, the big honey farmers will have their bees still outside, but there's so many bees that there's no way they have enough flowers, right? Especially during the summer when it's hot and it's dry and there's no more flowers. So, and they don't really want the bees flying very far away because there might be a highway there where they get hit, right? And so they want to keep the bees close by, and so they still supplement them with high fructose corn syrup, even outside. And then there's another problem, that those trays of high fructose corn syrup on a 110 degree day, and that sun beating down on them, it heats it up very high. When high fructose corn syrup gets heated, it forms a chemical in it called hydroxymethylfurfural, which is toxic to bees, probably contributed to the colony collapse disorder, and it's also carcinogenic to humans. So now you have hydroxymethylfurfural in your honey. Not only that, but the bees suffer from an infection called mites. It's a lung mite. And they use antibiotics to kill those mites. So I bet you didn't bargain for getting a dose of antibiotics in your honey.
Nope.
So the organic beekeepers do try to deal with that infection in a different way. But it's not always easy for them. And so another suggestion is, so I would suggest getting organic honey, number one. Number two, I'd also suggest that you never get your honey from Brazil. The reason for that is because the US has actually banned honey coming from China because China has leaded fuel and lots of other problems with environmental pollution, and so their honey is usually tainted with heavy metal toxicities and other things, and so the US won't let Chinese honey in. This has been the case long before the stuff that's happening with China right now, okay? And so, China sends their honey to Brazil, and Brazil repackages it and sells it to the US. So, and I'm sure not everybody in Brazil is doing that, and maybe Brazil has some good honey, but they have documented that kind of thing, and maybe there's other countries that are doing the same thing too, but apparently it's a big problem coming from Brazil. You don't want to eat baker's honey either. Baker's honey is the most useless honey of everything that's just, the reject stuff. So you want to get it from a specific vendor that you hopefully know their practices and maybe they're located in a nice place, etc. But we do eat some honey. So that was a long answer to a short question. Anybody else?
Well, I do.
Okay?
So avocado oil is
Yes.
already a carcinogen
organic, even?
Avocado oil is, as far as I know, I haven't seen virgin first cold pressed avocado oil. We use some on occasion, but very occasionally. It's probably a little bit, one of the better oils, and they claim it's good because it has a high smoke point, but you don't want to be smoking your oil anyway, so you shouldn't be up at those 500-degree temperatures that they say the avocado oil can handle. If I was going to use avocado on a more regular basis, I'd want to try to find a cold-pressed one, if that's available. The Costco one does not say it's cold-pressed. So we have used it on occasion. It's obviously looks like it would be an easier oil to get a hold of than something like grapeseed oil. So that should tell you that it's probably a lot better than grapeseed oil, because grapeseed, how are you going to get oil out of grape? You can't do that in your kitchen, right? Not a grape, but a grape seed, right? Your olive oil, one of the reasons why the olive oil is one of the best oils is there's several reasons. First of all, it's cold pressed. Secondly, it has a very good profile of unsaturated versus saturated and polyunsaturated fats. You want more monounsaturated fats and less saturated and polyunsaturated. And olive oil is one of the fats that has one of the highest levels of the monounsaturated. The polyunsaturated fats are much more, they're plant fats, but they're much more easily oxidized. So olive oil doesn't oxidize as easily because it's more of the monounsaturated fats, number one. Number two, olive oil has one of the highest levels of antioxidants in it after processing of any oil in the world. So it literally has all these antioxidants that God put in the oil that are somehow still preserved in the oil extraction process. And those antioxidants keep it from oxidizing for, if you take it up to 400 degrees for 2 hours, it will still maintain its antioxidant status because of all those antioxidants. They're busy keeping it from being oxidized. So you can bake with it. You just never want to burn it. If you ever smoke your oil, that's too hot. Throw it out. Literally, throw it out. Get it off the thing, wipe it out, get the paper towel, clean off the pan, put it back on, put new oil, and start over. Do not smoke your oil. That's causing a carcinogen right there. And I promised a special slide, and nobody reminded me, right? Ah! Okay, so we'll take your question, and I'll try to find that slide in the meantime.
What about eating olive oil
I
on
was the
bread?
next one week.
Oh,
What do you think of whole food, plant-based? They don't believe in using oil, like
Yeah. I don't think it's well supported by the Bible as a spirit of prophecy. I do think you want to be temperate with your oil usage. But I think it's quite clear that God used and valued oil even though it's extracted. And so at our retreat, we do use some refined oils, especially olive oil. And we use,
your inspiration and the science.
pardon?
That goes back to the inspiration
Yes.
and then the science.
Inspiration filters the science. And that's really the only way we can properly choose. Because if you just look at all the, quote, science, there's all kinds of conflicting voices. And you're not going to know, you're going to be confused and you're not going to know what to believe. So you have to filter your science by inspiration first. Yeah.
Lee, what do you want?
Oh, that's okay. I just put a little olive oil on your salad
Yes.
bread.
We're told in the spirit of prophecy that the oil from the olive is a good substitute for butter. Yes.
Okay.
Let me read you this. Okay, so the question was earlier
It was a coffee,
about
the up and down.
how do you know how to differentiate between some articles that say coffee is good for you and some articles that say coffee is bad for you. And we've just addressed it. Partly you filter it first by inspiration. That's number one. But you can also learn some very interesting things by just opening your eyes a little bit. So I'm going to give you this example here. And by the way, I didn't really talk about chocolate. I didn't really talk about chocolate. And I'm not going to have time to talk about everything that I have to say about chocolate. But I'll just say this one thing: chocolate contains caffeine. So I think I've already told you enough about caffeine that you would know that that's not a good plan, right? Because it's addictive, it has no caloric value.
I'll smile at you all. Momentary break.
Is this
Take a
the
deep
slide
breath,
that we were
stretch.
running? Huh?
Yes, this is the slide.
Yes, it is.
What about Karen?
Well, we're getting there. I'm going to have a couple of slides here. Carob is okay. I don't particularly like it, but
It's not bad. Thank you.
choose the right thing here. Okay. So you've all heard that certain kind of chocolate is healthy for you. Is that right? How do you know these things? Have you ever wondered how you know these things? Do you have any proof for this? I'll show you why you know this, okay? By the way, it's not possible to know something that's not true. So you just think you know it, okay? So I'll show you why you think you know this. This is the scientific study that gave us that privileged information to tell us that dark chocolate is healthy for us. This was published in the European Heart Journal in 2010. This is why everybody knows this, and this is put on all the news channels and everything. Chocolate consumption, blood pressure, and cardiovascular risk. This was an amazing study because it had 19,358 people in it. So it sounds very impressive because it's lots of people, right? Do you think it'd be hard to recruit people to eat chocolate for a study? Okay. So in this study, they were feeding them chocolate. They were providing them the chocolate. And they said that they divided them up into two groups, and they found that the group eating the most chocolate had the lowest blood pressure. Huh? Now, I just showed you the other night. Yes, I just showed you today how caffeine can raise the blood pressure, right? Chocolate has caffeine, so how could that be the case? Well, let's analyze the study carefully for a second. This is what they found. They divided the people up into a high chocolate eating group and the low chocolate eating group, okay? And they found that the ones that ate the most chocolate had the lowest blood pressure. You know how much they dropped their blood pressures? 1 millimeter. What? What? You know what else? Do you know how much chocolate they were eating in the high chocolate consumption group? 2 squares. That's not a lot. You know how much they were eating in the low chocolate eating group? 1 square. What? No, why didn't they compare people who are eating no chocolate with people who are eating a whole bar? Because it would probably given them a different result, right? All right, now let's read this study a little bit carefully, little parts of the study. Now notice this. This is interesting because we'll learn some things here. Here it is. It says their blood pressures were found to be 1 millimeter lower. 1 millimeter lower. Now, listen to this. The thing that's supposed to be good for you in chocolate is something called flavonols. Okay? Did you know that you don't need to eat chocolate to get flavonols? Flavonols are in apples and all kinds of other things. Okay? So you don't need flavonols from chocolate. But here's what they say. Right in the study, it says, while subject, I'm reading from this part right here, while subject to agricultural practices and food processing, particularly high flavanol levels can be present in cocoa. What? Can be present in cocoa? You mean the thing that's supposed to be good for you might not even be there? Oh, well, that's interesting. Now I want you to read something else here. This is very, very disturbing. Notice what they say here. The first part is true. They say, as cocoa, and therefore chocolate, contains various bioactives, i.e. flavonols, theobromine, caffeine, and others, So they're telling us here that chocolate contains caffeine. Lots of people tell me, oh, chocolate doesn't have caffeine, it has something like caffeine. That's not true. What they're thinking of is theobromine, and it does have theobromine, which is similar to caffeine, but it also has caffeine. You can find this out on Hershey's website. It has caffeine in it. So that part is true. But listen to what it says here. As cocoa and therefore chocolate contains various bioactives, i.e. flavonols, theobromine, caffeine, and others, the content of these bioactive compounds needs to be considered in the design of a proper control product. What? You need to consider how much caffeine is in your control product. Huh? That means, and they didn't tell us in this study how much caffeine was in their control product versus how much caffeine was in the experimental product. So, do you think it's possible that they might have manipulated the amount of caffeine that they were giving the people in order to make that change in blood pressure?
They wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that. All right, let's go to the end of the study. This is my favorite part. Okay, let's go to the end of the study. Now, I'm not so much bringing this up because I wanted to talk about chocolate, okay? But if you want to be a health reformer, if you want to be interested in health, you need to be consistent, right? And you need to have consistent principles that you're going to go by. So, the reason why I brought this study up is because of the next thing that we're going to read. We're going to go down to the very bottom here and read under funding. It says CH and MK, that's the initials of the researchers, Christian, Heiss, and Maltachelm, CH and MK have received unrestricted research funding from Mars Incorporated.
That's not the plan,
You see, this is not science. You don't know that dark chocolate is healthy for you because of science, because it's impossible for you to know something that's not true. You think you know it because Mars Incorporated did a very clever advertising campaign dressed up as scientific study. This is not scientific study. This is advertising propaganda. And do you think this is the only time this has ever happened in the history of this world? This is what they do all the time. All the time. So this goes to illustrate how you can at least attempt to filter out some of the bogus scientific data that's out there. All right, any more questions? So now we're going to have a pile of questions after that.
Well, it's just, I mean, 70% of research papers are not peer reviewed, so
Yeah,
they can easily.
yeah. And even the peer-reviewed ones, oftentimes the peer review is stacked or biased themselves or something else. You know, I mean, if you peer review something, you know, if a doctor is telling you to take a statin, and he's on a statin himself, do you think he's going to tell you that the statin is a bad idea? Of course not. Do you think if a doctor is drinking caffeine, do you think he's going to tell you that caffeine is bad for you? Of course not. And do you think most doctors are more likely to be drinking caffeine or not? Drinking. Yeah, they're drinking, just like the rest of society. That's the problem. Everybody in society is going down the same, what did the Bible say? Broad is the road that leads to destruction. Many there be that find it. Narrow is the way that leads to life. Few there be that go therein. So if you find yourself in harmony with the rest of society, you're not on a good road. It's not easy to be on the narrow road, because then you get made fun of and all kinds of other things from the rest of society. It's not easy to be on the narrow road. The narrow road is the only way. When has the majority ever been right? Any more questions? All right, let's have a word of prayer, and then let's head downstairs. Father in heaven, we thank you for the amazing information you've given in your word, that we can use it as a filter, even in modern times, to know, in the midst of all these different voices claiming to have the authoritative truth, we can know what truth is. You have promised we shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. I ask that you would set each one of us free tonight from whatever is binding us to this world, whether it be appetite, passion, whether it be a food that we eat or a habit that we have, whether it be media. I pray that this series of lectures will start each one of these people on a greater journey toward bringing their life more into harmony with your will and preparing to be ready to meet you when you come. That is our ultimate goal. We want to be ready for the society and culture of heaven. Please keep us for that event in Jesus' name.